All right, live pictures. You can see President Trump's motorcade outside of the New York City courthouse. Inside the New York City courthouse, the prosecutors are delivering their closing arguments in the Trump trial. This is as late as the trial has ever gone, 7 p.m. Eastern in New York, also 7 p.m. here in Washington. We expect President Trump to talk to the assembled media. Here is the stakeout camera, as we have come to know it, when he leaves the courtroom. So the prosecutors will end their closing arguments. We understand jury instructions will happen tomorrow, not today. And then the jury deliberations will begin. President Trump's lawyers went earlier. They tried awfully hard to destroy the credibility of Michael Cohen. And then the prosecutors are trying to rehabilitate Michael Cohen. With that, we welcome you to the fairest show on television. There will be a verdict in this case. Guilty, not guilty, or perhaps a hung jury. We'll obviously keep our eye on the courthouse in New York. Also keep our eye on the White House here in Washington, where President Biden and his campaign have radically changed how they are dealing with the Trump trial. For so long, President Biden has said, I have nothing to do with it. I'm not going to talk about the Trump trials. That might be changing, and here's why. 160 days from now, Americans head to the polls. A Trump conviction, if it happens, is going to be a distant memory, and that's if a Trump conviction even happens. The verdict in this case, as we watch what's happening in New York, the verdict might not actually matter all that much. How it happens will matter a lot. Who knows? A conviction might help Donald Trump. It's a bold statement, but I do have history on my side. Trump's weathered every political storm imaginable. Just go back, to 2015, the Golden Escalator. He said John McCain wasn't a war hero, survived that. Well, he talked about how important building a wall was. That worked. He claimed that rapists and murderers were crossing from Mexico. Everyone said that was the end of his political career. It wasn't. His polling went up in each of the 4 indictments. The Hollywood Access Hollywood tape, grab her by the whatever tape, well, he survived that and won the presidency. He killed Qasem Soleimani. There were 2 impeachments. And there were some very inappropriate comments about Megyn Kelly. All of those things were labeled as the end of Trump. Finally, he had done it. But they weren't. Between now and November, he'll say or create at least half a dozen other crazy moments that will define the presidency, define our democracy. People will claim they disqualify him from the race, and life will go on. Nearly 10 years into Trump, I have lost count of all the times people claimed that this time, this one thing would be different and finally bring him down, and it never has. Bill O'Reilly, host of the No Spin News, author of the coming book, Confronting the President's No Spin Assessments from Washington to Biden, is with us after the Memorial Day weekend. Bill, we know what you think of the New York business records case. You are on record on this show going through why you think it is a made-up, phony, political witch hunt of a case. All said, well and done. Does a conviction here hurt Donald Trump?
It's impossible really to say, because you're talking about a percentage of people who are still on the fence, which is very small. So the MAGA people, the Trump supporters, not going to influence them one way or the other. The hate Trumpers, the Biden people, no matter what happens, if he's acquitted, whatever, they're still going to hate Trump. You're talking about a very small percentage of the American voters. But I want to make a few observations, Leland, and I'd like to hear your opinion of them. Number one, no matter what happens in this trial, the damage to the United States is substantial. Many Americans now believe the justice system no longer exists, that it's weaponized to hurt political people and others. And there's some truth to that. The actual malice of the trial fuels hatred and divides the American people even further. So the MAGA people just hate Robert De Niro, and Robert De Niro hates the MAGA people. Well, it's going to get worse, no matter what happens. So you're looking at a corrosive display that, in my opinion, never should have happened because you can't prove criminal intent. Take you back to Hillary Clinton, no doubt. Hillary Clinton had on her private server classified information, no doubt. She erased about 50,000 texts and emails. Wasn't prosecuted because the Justice Department said, we don't believe there was criminal intent. Well, based on what? They didn't want to believe it. Here with Donald Trump, you're telling me that Donald Trump looked up election law and said, hey, we can pay these people off and we'll subvert election law. Do you really think that's what he did? Come on.
Okay, so you're making a point. Right, you're making a point. You're going back to Hillary Clinton, and you're basically saying you've got two sides. It's tribalism. Robert De Niro, who's the actor, showed up today because President Biden's team has decided now they're going to lean into Donald Trump on trial. They're saying they may even come out and have President Biden talk about the trials on and on. But are you not making my point that what the verdict is here, we're looking at De Niro now outside the courthouse, that what the verdict is may not really matter in terms of a conviction that you see Democrats wanting for and dreaming about. I don't think it's unfair to say that a conviction might convince the very few persuadables, hey, Donald Trump really is being targeted. People are really out to get him the way he's always said.
Well, it's a big might there, Leland. I might win the lottery tomorrow. I don't think you can bank on one thing or another. But the Biden campaign is desperate. And when you have to trot out a guy like Robert De Niro, remember, the Biden campaign asked him to do this. Did Robert De Niro persuade anybody about anything? He's not a PhD in political science, number one. He hates Trump's guts, number two. Why on earth would a president of the United States enlist this man to make any case whatsoever in the political arena? Now, if they want to do Godfather 4 and Joe wants a cameo, I'd talk to Robert De Niro about it. But this is just a fiasco. The whole trial is a fiasco. But the danger is it is corroding the nation's spirit. And there is no doubt about that.
All right. Let me put it to you a different way. Views of Trump among Republicans are shifting. May PBS NewsHour Marist poll, I know what you think of your alma mater's polls, show that 46% of Trump say he has acted unethically. That number has jumped 12 points since February. The undecided voters that exist, do they care about Trump and Biden are trying to make their minds up about which one is a better human being, or do they care, for lack of a better term, about issues that affect them, meaning the economy, immigration, the economy,
the latter.
Immigration?
When you read Confronting the Presidents, Leland, and I'll have the galley to you in the next day or two.
What's the galley?
Most of a galley is an advance on the book, okay? It's only given to very important people, and I don't know how you get on that list. So you'll have a galley of the book.
Clearly.
All right? And you will read the book and see that most of our 46 presidents have been bad people. They've been bad. And what is going to happen in this election is that it's a referendum on Biden. Last time it was a referendum on Trump. Now it's changed. It's Biden is doing such a terrible job inflicting unnecessary pain on the nation and the working class that people, even if they don't like anything about Trump, will go, we can't have 4 more years of this. Do you know what Biden's doing this week, Leland? Do you know what his schedule is this week?
He's got a trip to Philadelphia. Other than that, not much.
Okay. And he's not going to Philadelphia for any other reason than to raise money for his campaign. He's spending most of the week in Rehoboth Beach at his beach house. And he's going to the White House for one event, to say hello to the Kansas City Chiefs and congratulate Harrison Butler on his political analysis. I'm sure Joe will do that. Okay? That is in his entire week. Tonight on the No Spin News, my television broadcast, I named the 3 guys that are running the Biden White House. Okay? There's 3 of them: chief of staff, counsel, and chief speechwriter. The most powerful person in the White House is Jill Biden. Nothing gets done unless Jill says okay. Joe Biden isn't doing anything. You want 4 more years of this? You know who wants it? Putin. Xi, the mullahs in Tehran, right. They all want it. Hamas wants it. You want it? Vote for Biden. I understand the downside of Donald Trump better than anybody in this country.
This is the issue, right? Is this a referendum on Donald Trump? Is this a referendum on Joe Biden? And what you're seeing, why Robert De Niro showed up, right? Biden is trying to make it a referendum on Trump. Put your analysis hat on. Is there a way that if Donald Trump is convicted, that this becomes a referendum on Donald Trump?
No, because people spending twice as much in the grocery store is more important than Stormy Daniels. Okay? It's that simple. I'm a simple man. You're getting whacked every time you turn around because Joe Biden attacked the fossil fuel industry, unleashed an incredible amount of federal spending, which jacked up every price of everything. And you're going to tell me that people are going to go, I didn't like what Trump did with Stormy Daniels, so I'm going to vote for the guy who's causing me financial pain. Is that what you're going to tell me? That will not happen. People who live in the real world, unlike Robert De Niro and his merry friends, are going to vote yes or no on Biden. And that's why the polls show Trump leading at this point.
And have for a while. I know you had a message of the day that if the election were held today, Donald Trump would win, which is difficult to argue with. Bill? Yeah, no, 100%. I would agree with that. Bill, it's good to see you as always. Thank you. A long couple of days ahead of us. Gallery.
Enjoy your not woke mug along with the galley I send you of confronting the presidents. Right. I'm looking out for you, Leland.
I appreciate that. I now have reading for this weekend. Thank you. There it is. Become a premium member. Get a free book. Confronting the Presidents at BillO'Reilly.com. Bill, good to see you. Breaking news continues out of New York. We're told the court is back in session at 7:15 p.m. Eastern. The judge expects to wrap up by 8 p.m. That means it's likely we'll hear from Donald Trump in the next 45 minutes or so. Also ahead for us, President Biden's already beaten Trump once. We talked about this with Bill O'Reilly. So why is Team Biden refusing to go back to that playbook, running on a very normal, centrist campaign? We're going to get inside Team Biden's choice to bring out Robert De Niro.
You're washed up. You're a filthy. You're a nobody. You're movie stuff. You're trash.
They're not quite burning the midnight oil at the White House or at the courthouse in New York. At the White House, they woke up to a pretty stark headline this morning from Politico. Dems in full-blown freakout over Biden. And the reporting from Politico is that Team Biden and Democrats are in freakout mode because what's happening at the courthouse is not changing Americans' opinion of Donald Trump. And more importantly, they're not changing Americans' opinion of Joe Biden. All of the president's men can't get voters to focus on how bad Donald Trump will be. Today, to try to make the case, they brought out Robert De Niro, the actor. All right. So, the message from Team Biden: things might be bad. Inflation, the border, wars in Ukraine, the Middle East. But, and Robert De Niro made this point, is that Trump is a far, far bigger danger. Here's De Niro.
I love this city. I love this city. I don't want to destroy it. Donald Trump wants to destroy not only the city, but the country, and eventually he could destroy the world.
Alex Thompson's here, national political correspondent for Axios, working on a book about the Biden administration. Hey, welcome back, my friend. It's good to see you. Thank you. All right. Bill O'Reilly made the point, and I think very correctly. If this is a referendum on Joe Biden loses. If it's a referendum on Donald Trump loses. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how everybody sees this race, right?
Yeah,
okay. Right. So what is left for Team Biden to try and make this a referendum on Donald Trump if Robert De Niro doesn't work?
Well, the Robert De Niro thing was so interesting because they basically admitted it was a stunt. I mean, literally the Biden communications director went out and said, the reason we're here is not the trial, it's because all the media is here. So they brought out a celebrity to get all the media attention. It worked. I don't know if it worked in the way that they were hoping because there was obviously some jeering of him. He also lost his temper, so who knows if that worked. But to your other point, which I think is really important, what else can the Biden team do? Now, I think what's important is the last 2 months, Donald Trump has been trapped in a courtroom. He has basically not been able to campaign. His campaign does not have that much money and has not been spending on TV, whereas the Biden campaign has basically been spending every dollar they've been raising on TV and staff. And yet, Donald Trump's approval rating has gone up. And so if you're the Biden campaign spending all this money trying to change these polls and it's not working, what can you do? Like the next big event's going to be the debate, and I guess they're going to hope for that. But, they're doing all the normal blocking and tackling, but it's not working yet.
To play out the football metaphor, but people are still getting through to the end zone.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's that headline, Dem Freak Out, and you read the piece in Politico. It does not have nearly the depth or breadth of Axios reporting in terms of, see, I got a smile out. There we go. No, but really, it was sort of a couple of anonymous quotes and then, hey, here's what the campaign says. Thank you very much. The problem with freaking out is that you start making dumb decisions and then it causes people to freak out even more. Is there a game plan beyond telling everyone how terrible Donald Trump is?
I'd say the game plan really is not just about how terrible Donald Trump was as president, which they've obviously been doing, but I think there's a big hope that it's not just Donald Trump from 2020, that it's going to be Donald Trump from 2024, meaning that it's going to really focus on January 6th and abortion rights. Those are two events that happened after the 2020 election that they feel that if they spend $1.5 billion, which they're going to do, is going to remind voters that this guy tried to overturn the last election, this guy stole away rights, he can appoint another SCOTUS justice, and that will make a bigger difference than it did in 2020.
Okay. I mean, that therein, we'll see whether it works or not in November. There does seem to be this odd shift that is happening right now in terms of public opinion. Dennis Quaid, for example, on Piers Morgan just a couple of hours ago.
Trump is the most investigated person probably in the history of the world. And they haven't been able to really get him. People might call him a but he's
I've heard voters say that exact same line, right, too, about Donald Trump. And I do think there is sort of, in part because he's been around for so long, there is sort of like a normalization of Trump going on. Like you see like some business leaders.
So what do we do? What is the Biden administration's plan here? Because there's this other reporting that all of a sudden they're going to try and make a Trump conviction the centerpiece of their campaign, right? That he's a convicted felon. That seems to fly totally in the face, though, of how Team Biden has been trying to say, we have nothing to do with the trials. This is completely non-political. Are they at the point that they don't care about the hypocrisy of it?
Well, that was why it was so interesting to see them go to the courthouse. Now, they said it was just because the media was there, but they've stayed away from it for the last 2 months. Now, all of a sudden, they're at that very, very end. They're finally going to do it. And the Trump campaign took advantage of calling them out, just like you said. They said, oh, I thought this wasn't political. These weren't political trials. Now, the Biden team is going to try to say, well, Alvin Bragg's a New York, prosecutor. This isn't the DOJ cases. And that's how they're going to try to split the difference.
Interesting that they chose Robert De Niro. I still can't figure that out. But
they also had him narrate an ad last week too, and they were very proud of it. I can tell you, they were trying to. They were selling us lots of releases.
We'll see if he gets his spot at the convention.
Yeah,
good to see you. Thank you as always. All right, back from D.C. to New York. We're still waiting to hear from Donald Trump before 7 men and 5 women. Well, they will take the weight of the world on their shoulders, or maybe the weight of the week, which is how long this story will last. They will decide Trump's fate. What will happen when deliberations actually begin? An inside look at the jury room. And did Los Angeles' ruthless thugs finally go too far? Big issue in the election. The murder forcing Hollywood to deal with their soft on crime policies.
It's not okay. This can't keep happening. So many lives are being lost.
7:30 right now in New York City, and prosecutors are still delivering their closing argument in the Trump business records trial. We're waiting to hear from the former president once the day in court wraps up. So that could be anytime between now and about 8 p.m. I want to give you a sense of what the jury is going to have to go through. They have 5 weeks of testimony. So take you inside the jury room to give you a sense of what it's going to be like as they deliberate. By the numbers in terms of what this has gone through, 236 pieces of evidence. A lot of those are very complex financial records. 22 witnesses, 20 for the prosecution, 2 for the defense. So the jurors will go through all of those, and they have the opportunity, if they want, to go back through and look at the testimony and obviously to look at the records as well. 34 felony counts. And this is what's pretty interesting here. They're grouped into 3 different buckets, if you will. 11 counts of falsifying business records for each invoice, 12 for general ledger entries. These are entries into the Trump organization's business books, and then 11 involving each separate check that was used. That's how you get to this 34 count indictment, basically for one act of trying to allegedly falsify business records as it relates to the Stormy Daniels payment. All right, so let's look at the jurors who will make up this decision. Obviously, we don't have pictures of any of them, but we do know a lot about each one. 7 men, 5 women. Juror number 1, pretty interesting to keep an eye on, born in Ireland, and a lawyer, and then also juror number 7, who's a litigator. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and New York Post, where juror number 7 gets their news. 2 work in the legal profession. And big question was asked, where do you get your news? There's a whole mix of outlets up here. One has TikTok listed. We've talked a lot about Michael Cohen. He is the president's former fixer. That's where it all comes down to, is his testimony. But former President Trump's attorney, Ty Cobb, predicts a guilty verdict, not necessarily because of the facts, but he believes the jury instructions require a conviction. The judge ruled the jury does not need to unanimously agree on what predicated the crime, meaning the jury has to agree that Trump falsified records to conceal a crime. They don't have to agree on what the separate crime is, which is unusual, we are told. With us now, New York City criminal defense attorney Michael DeSharo, veteran trial consultant J. Lee Miles. Good to see both of you. Thank you. Michael, right now we're at 5 hours of closing arguments by the prosecution. In Law and Order, a long closing argument's 4 minutes. What's going on?
Well, there's a lot of evidence to go through, as you stated. There are a lot of documents to go through, as you stated. This may be a case of overkill. These jurors have sat through a lot. They've agreed to go the whole night because I think they want to get it over with. But 5 hours is excessive, and it should have been pared down. The attention span of the average person today, as you well know, is simply not that. I can't imagine it couldn't be pared down to 2 hours.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. J. Lee Miles with us now. How big of an issue is it for prosecutors to try and rehabilitate Michael Cohen? He admitted to stealing. He's an admitted perjurer. Is there any way to get a jury to re-believe someone, once, to use Michael DeSharo's words, they've been left for dead on the stand?
Yes, but like most of us, I am in the cheap seats out here watching the trial, through the news. And they always knew Cohen was going to be their biggest liability. And I think that they prepared for that going into his testimony. And so now they're contrasting Mr. Trump's lies against Mr. Cohen's history of lying.
All right. I guess in that sense, you're the jury consultant. How do you get someone to be beyond a reasonable doubt when so much of the evidence required is based on believing a liar?
Yeah, great question. And I do think in this case, just from what I've seen, that a conviction is likely, at least certainly on some of the counts. You've got 34 low-level felonies. I think an acquittal is unlikely, but I do think there's still a possibility of a hung jury in this case, and some of it rides on the credibility of raising.
Yeah.
So I also.
I think we're having a little bit of a problem with your signal. It's freezing. That sometimes happens right at the most important points. Live pictures outside the courtroom. There's some people hanging out there. Michael, you talked from the very beginning of this case about the predicate crimes, meaning in order to get to a felony for falsifying invoices, general ledger, or checks, there has to be another crime before that. What do you make of this ruling by the judge that the jury doesn't have to agree on what the underlying crime is?
Leland, I am blown away by that jury instruction that the judge said he's going to charge the jury with. I've never seen any jury instruction that left the jury to pick a theory, and even if you come up with different theories, as long as you can, 6 jurors can think of one thing, 6 jurors can agree it's another thing, and you can still find them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. If you look at all the jury instructions in New York, and your viewers can read them, they're all online, they're very straightforward. If someone commits assault, this is what you have to prove. I've never seen a case where the jury has said the crime, you can guess, and it doesn't matter which, if you don't agree on all the counts. This is ripe for being overturned. I agree. There's a very good chance of conviction if we don't all have to agree. But if you don't all have to agree, then it doesn't set the standard beyond a reasonable doubt. This is a denial of due process when you're telling a jury that they don't have to agree. And that's what I said from the beginning. Weak cases make bad law. And this is a very weak case, but there still could be a hung jury.
All right, J. Lee Miles back with us. We understand that the connection has improved. Take us through what happens just from the sense of a jury that for 6 weeks now, they've been sitting there, they've been listening, they've been sitting there listening, sitting there listening, sitting there listening. This is the first time they get to talk amongst themselves and discuss the case. There's all this discussion. It's going to be a quick verdict. Can we predict that?
I highly doubt that. This seems like a very thoughtful jury. You have a lot of highly experienced jurors sitting there who are going to understand the finance, who are going to understand the law. And so I think that what I tend to learn from talking with jurors after it's all done, and the verdict's been in, is first they don't have to pick their foreperson. That's been done for them. So there goes that. But they sometimes do a straw poll around the room. Just how are you feeling right now? But they usually really deliberately go through the evidence, especially in such a, high profile case like this one. I think they'll take it very seriously and take their time.
Michael, in terms of the jury instructions and what the judge says, we've seen and gotten so much reporting, and the fact that none of this is on camera makes it so much harder. But Ty Cobb basically made the point, and others have as well, that the jury instructions are so open-ended here. It's, if you think Donald Trump may have done something wrong, vote to convict him. Is that a fair assessment of what they're going to be told to do tomorrow morning?
I think so. The fact that they weren't told that they have to prove, they have to accept something beyond a reasonable doubt and find that there was reason, it was proven to them by the prosecutors beyond a reasonable doubt, any number of theories. So some people could say, I believe it was tax fraud. I believe it was campaign violations. I've never seen a jury instruction like that, even in murder cases where the motive may be at play, right? Because motive is not an element of the crime. An element of the crime is that the person caused the death of another, and people can argue over motive. But in this case, they're talking about the element of the crime that you and I can differ and still convict him. I think Mr. Cobb is right.
So, J. Lee Miles, ending now where we began with Michael on the 5-hour closing argument. Now, there have been a couple of breaks, but it's still going on. We're told that the judge wants to wrap things up by 8 o'clock. That's 22 minutes from now. Who knows whether it happens or not. What is your jury consultant? You're talking to a prosecutor who wants to deliver a 5-hour summation. What is your cost-benefit analysis with them of doing it? Does it show a confident prosecutor, a weak prosecutor? Where is it?
Depends on the case. It's very interesting because in general, I would say it's too long. However, in this case, I think most veteran trial lawyers know your case is open for winning or being lost based on who your jurors are. And it's also, I've seen many cases, big cases, truly won in the closing arguments. And the prosecution's got to just tie a bow around everything. They've got to wrap it up. And so obviously, they feel they've got to go through this methodically, piece by piece. And the defense did a terrific job, I thought, putting on their closing, even with the improper reference to possibly sending someone to prison. And they seemed to sandwich everything in the Cohen way. I think that was on their top 10 reasons. There's reasonable doubt. Number 1 and number 10 were all about Cohen. So the prosecutors have got to go back and take each piece, if only to get convictions on as many of the felonies as possible.
Yeah, and that's the big question, right, in terms of whether there's going to be convictions on some and not on others, because each one of these is an individual count. Michael, stay with us. Ms. Miles, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. To listen to someone who's been in there and interviewed these jurors and seen what they go through, we appreciate it. 20 minutes or so, we're told court is going to wrap up. That means that Donald Trump would come out and speak again to the media. The judge, well, there's been a lot of focus on him. How much does the judge really matter once the jury goes into deliberations? Things could change as we watch President Trump's motorcade await Donald Trump's last day on trial. By listening to closing arguments by the prosecution, we expect Mr. Trump to speak sometime after court ends, but who knows how long that could be. Press on with news of the day and keep you updated as things happen in New York. Obviously, the trial will have a huge effect on the campaign, as will crime. And sadly, but finally, Los Angeles might have had enough with crime. We're seeing this across the country. Thieves shot and killed actor Johnny Wachter while trying to steal his car's catalytic converter. Evidently, he tried to confront them, and they killed him. He is the former actor in General Hospital. Wachter's ex-fiancée and former co-star, Tessa Farrell, responded this way.
It's not okay. This can't keep happening. So many lives are being lost. And it's so sad that crime in LA had to do this. And I'm hoping that change some legislation to prevent this from happening. These criminals can't keep being on the street, and they can't keep being sent back and have no repercussions for their actions.
Former Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva has been saying that for an awfully long time. When you hear that from the Hollywood set, does things start to change?
Well, you know what? The Hollywood set is the front of the progressive movement in LA. And they've got the entire state legislature, all the propositions, Props 47, Prop 57, every single thing that they've wanted, they've been able to achieve. Under the banner of criminal justice reform, they remove consequences for career criminals. And I guarantee you the people involved in this tragedy, that was not their first rodeo with crime, shooting this person while they're stealing a catalytic converter. And you know what? The chickens have come home to roost. Now we have to deal with a lawless society. How do we turn the tide back on this?
Look, the first step in any 12-step process is admitting you have a problem, and nothing sort of identifies a problem like it happening to your loved ones. Suddenly it's no longer sort of on the wrong side of the tracks, and it's right front and center. Is this enough? Are you seeing a change in emotion just because of this one incident?
Well, we had the murder of Jackie Avant in her home by a transient who broke in at 2 a.m. We had other ones. Other tragedies have been similar in nature, horrifying, and yet somehow the pendulum doesn't swing hard enough back to the center. It's still stuck on the far left side, and some say stuck on stupid, because we have a DA in office who doesn't prosecute crime. We have a legislator bent on allowing crime to remain unprosecuted or to facilitate criminal activity. So these things continue to happen, and I don't know if we're at that point yet. I'm worried.
What comes next in this? Because the media is going to move on from it, right? And the Hollywood set will move on from it because they don't want to announce that they got it wrong. This actor's family is going to obviously grieve. His ex-fiancée is going to be in a terrible state. But what happens for the residents of New York who don't have millions of followers on TikTok and can't leave Los Angeles and go to their places out in Palm Springs?
Well, unfortunately, they bear the brunt of everything. This is the tragedy on this, because the Hollywood crowd is so obsessed with somehow that the law enforcement is beating down the poor person of color, and they're dehumanizing them and criminalizing poverty, you name it. Yet the ones that are mostly impacted are people of color, the ones that live in the tough neighborhoods, the ones that are living with the defunding the police movement, and they saw a loss of law enforcement. They want them back, yet they don't have the voice that the Hollywood crowd has. So we're going to have to see how this is going to transform into some movement where people are starting to be held accountable. We get rid of George Gascon, our DA, and we start enforcing the law like we're supposed to.
It's a great point. Until you start enforcing the law, it doesn't change, and the pendulum takes a while to stop swinging one way and to start swinging back. Sheriff, thank you. We appreciate the perspective. It's good to see you. The woman you just saw there, Tessa Farrell, ex-fiancée of actor Johnny Vactor, will speak out after he was fatally shot. That's tonight on Banfield at 10/9 Central. Back to New York City. 8 p.m. was the witching hour when the prosecutors were supposed to wrap up their 5-hour closing argument. At what point are they trying to do the impossible? Can they convince a jury to believe Michael Cohen? Well, in just about the past 90 seconds or so, closing arguments have ended in the Donald Trump business records case. Prosecutors went a full 5 hours doing damage control, trying to rehabilitate Michael Cohen's credibility. That is the former president's fixer who so much of their case relies on. Michael DeSharo, a year and a half ago, when this came out, when this indictment was made public, criminal defense attorney in New York, he said this all comes down to Michael Cohen. That was 18 months ago. Well, any more predictions after that one, Counselor?
I am willing to make a prediction that this will be a hung jury. I cannot. That's the final statement I'll say on this, because no one can predict a jury. But I have a hard time with 12 people, even with these disastrous and probably illegal jury instructions. These are New Yorkers. These aren't your average jurors. These are highly educated people, and they don't like to be told what to think. They don't like to be told what to say. And as soon as there's any sort of hint in the jury room that someone is trying to take over, there's going to be a reaction. And the two lawyers are key. Do they have separate camps? Or are they all joining together in one camp? So I could very well see a hung jury. But I'm still shocked at the jury instructions. I never expected these kind of jury instructions, because I've asked around, and I would challenge anyone to show me any jury instructions that are like these.
Michael, we've had you on for the past many months for this case because you have looked at it from a legal, not a political lens. Obviously, once the verdict comes in, there's going to be a huge political component to any analysis. That said, there's going to be a legal component as well. And throughout this trial, I have heard enormous criticism by Donald Trump supporters of the jury. And I have heard no criticism of the judge, enormous criticism by Donald Trump supporters of the judge, and absolutely no criticism from anybody on the left of the judge. I'm old school. I think if someone's doing their job, they should get criticized by both sides. Does that tell us that this judge, at least on the face of these rulings, appears to be quite favorable to the prosecution?
I don't see Judge Merchan going that way. A judge can simply have a different legal opinion and not be politically motivated. I mean, the idea of not letting the election law expert testify, I think was a wrong idea, but I also see the other side of it, that is the judge that gives the jury the law. So I don't see this judge as political. I see him as just wrong on the law and allowing this case to fester on. Now this jury is going to meander through these charges, and 6 jurors are going to say, I think it was tax fraud. I think it was. He has given them no guidance, and I expect a lot of readback and trying to explain the evidence further. And if it gets too complicated, they may just throw up their hands.
God. And there were so many of us hoping for a quick verdict. But alas, we will press on. Michael, thank you very much. We appreciate your insights. And this is the waiting. We don't get any more in terms of arguments. Michael, thank you. At one point, the woman we have watching there, Libby Dean, in the courthouse, said that the jury stopped taking notes during the 5-hour summation of the prosecutor and began to look bored and stare at the clock. So take from that what you will. Closing arguments have wrapped up. The judge is giving some final instructions. You can see one of President Trump's what appears to be Secret Service agents waiting for him to come out and speak. Tomorrow morning, the jury gets its final instructions, and then deliberations begin in the Donald Trump business records case. In a few days, we will know whether Donald Trump is the first president in American history to ever be convicted of a crime. Here's Chris.